This is Saddleworth Moor, a place close to my heart, a place I call home. Although beautiful, this place will forever be tarnished by the heinous crimes of two individuals, Ian Brady and Myra Hindley, where the lives of 5 innocent children were cut short. In this episode, we will be looking at just one letter from Ian Brady, but it's probably the most revealing single letter I've ever come across, written from behind bars. He talks about life as a free man, shares his views on society, and talks about destroying evidence. But most importantly, this letter gives you a real insight into the persona of Ian Brady. But who was Ian Brady? Born in Glasgow in 1938, Brady attended Shawlands Academy, a school for bright pupils. His violent personality was shaped by an unstable background. His mother neglected him, and he was raised by foster parents in the Gorbals, Glasgow's toughest slum. After a spree of petty crimes as a teenager, the court sent him to Manchester to live with his mum and her new husband, Patrick Brady. Ian took his stepfather's name, continued his criminal activities, and developed into a teenage alcoholic. He pursued new interests, building up a library of books of a very perverse nature. The letter we are about to look through was written to his pen pal, David Brocourt, who has written a book about his correspondence and journey with various inmates. You can find a link to this in the description. Dear David, thanks for yours of March 2010. Gratified to hear that Janus held something of interest. It's now accepted reading in the UK-US universities and translated. Straight away, we're hit with Brady's narcissism. He opens up about how well his book is doing, being accepted and translated into different languages. Wow. So NC is still doing okay? He must have taken my advice and kept away from this septic island entirely, the most repressive in Europe. When Ian says NC, he's actually referring to Nico Clos, known as the Vampire of Paris, who is known as a real-life cannibal. Nico's case is a video on its own, but I do think it's bizarre how these two were corresponding with each other. I reached out to Nico to ask him about his friendship with Brady, and this is what he said.
Well, yes, I am the NC that Ian Brady mentions in his letters. I used to correspond with him for a few years when I was in prison, and he often would talk about his Scottish heritage, and he had this fascination with William Wallace. Of course, he would never mention the murders, but he would be really curious about how was life like in French prisons. I asked him if he ever knew someone who corresponded with Issei Segawa. And a few weeks later, he sent me Segawa's address, and it was the beginning of a really long correspondence with Segawa for me. So yes, he was vital.
Segawa, for those who are not already accustomed, is probably the most infamous cannibal in the world, and a huge connection for Nico Clos. In 1961, Hindley, then 18 years old and 4 years younger than Brady, got a job as a typist at Millard's Merchandising. She fell in love with him instantly, but it took him over a year to reciprocate. After a Christmas party, he offered to walk her home. Outside her home, he asked her out on a date. They started going steady, usually going to the movies and then to Hindley's house to drink German wine. Brady impressed her by reading war propaganda in the original German and shared his belief that essay and murder was not wrong. Devoted to him, Hindley started dressing in short skirts and long boots, continued to bleach her hair, and even stopped going to church when he told her that there was no God. Yes, travelled through France several times to buy guns in Belgium before the established controlled supplies in the UK. Always stayed in Paris, even if only for a night sometimes. When travelling by car, I preferred the secondary roads, sampling the wine and cheese in small villages, etc., where the old store buildings and cobbled lanes steeped with history. Also visited Germany, Austria and points east, the villages in the latter being without light, might have been in any century but the 20th, the darkness holding only the musty scent of foliage and damp earth. It feels like a travel show that Anthony Bourdain would be in, taking the secondary roads, sampling the local cuisine and taking in the culture. Serial killers tend to not be so refined, and this is part of what makes Brady so fascinating. He's clearly not some crazed brute, but even more terrifying, he seems very aware. Yes, I tried oils in the 1970s, doing 2 surrealistic studies, which won a prize at the Costa Awards exhibition. Never did anymore. Attempted to here, but they discourage any form of positive creativity, as it highlights the negativity of admin and staff freeloading here. The more Brady tells me about himself, the more he sounds to me like Hannibal Lecter, the educated, refined intellectual who is also a pure psychopath. Lecter himself enjoyed fine wines and food and indulged in painting. And like Hannibal Lecter, Brady wants you to know how intelligent he is. Thanks for the photo of Metz. I destroyed hundreds of locational photo negatives long before capture for strategic purposes. Them, the media scavengers, pinched the rest, including family ones I only had a single copy of. When he talks about locational photos, I'm assuming he's talking about potential clues as to where he buried the bodies on the moors. Probably more photos like these that could have potentially helped find the remains of the last missing victim, Keith Bennett, who has still not been found to this day. Let's take a look at the victims. Pauline Reed was the first victim of Hindley and Brady. On July 12, 1963, Brady had told Hindley he wanted to commit his perfect murder when he spotted 16-year-old Pauline. Hindley asked her if she would help her locate an expensive glove she had lost in the moor. She later claimed Brady then took Pauline onto the moor, where he slashed her throat twice and essayed her. Brady claims that Hindley helped. It was only 19 years after he was caged for life over the sickening crimes that Brady confessed to Pauline's murder. On June 30th, 1987, after more than 100 days of searching, the body of Pauline Reed was found buried 3 feet below the ground. The next victim was John Kilbride. On November 23rd, 1963, Hindley approached John Kilbride in Ashton-under-Lyne and offered him a lift home. Brady told the 12-year-old he would give him some sherry, but that they would have to make a detour to the moor first. Brady essayed the youngster and attempted to slit his throat with a 6-inch serrated blade before fatally strangling him with a piece of string. The next victim was Keith Bennett, just 12 years old. Keith was on his way to his grandmother's house on June 16th, 1964, when Hindley lured him into her van. She drove to a lay-by on the moor, and Brady took the boy while Hindley kept watch. Brady reappeared 30 minutes later, having essayed and strangled Keith. After Brady was transferred from prison to a maximum security hospital, Brady confessed to Keith's murder in an interview with reporters. A search was carried out on the moors a year later, with Hindley joining officers in 1986 and Brady in 1987. But Keith's body was never found. It is now a secret Brady has taken to the grave. Desperate for another victim, cruel Brady and Hindley visited a fairground on Boxing Day 1964 and came across Leslie Ann Downey. They approached the 10-year-old and lured her back to their house, where she was undressed, gagged and forced to pose for photographs before being essayed and killed. The following morning, Brady and Hindley drove with Downey's body to Saddleworth Moor, where she was buried, naked with her clothes at her feet, in a shallow grave. At their trial in 1966, all male jurors fell silent for 16 minutes as the tape recording of Leslie Ann Downey's terrified last moments was played to the court. The tape was played at full volume, and the chilling sounds of screaming echoed through the court, before only the footsteps and soft voices in the background could be heard. This is the transcript of the tape, and I will read you a few lines, but be warned, this is very harrowing. Man, put it in. Child, can I just tell you something? I must tell you something, please. Take your hands off me a minute, please, please. Mummy, please. I can't tell you. Grunting. Child, I can't tell you. I can't breathe. Oh, I can't. Dad, will you take your hands off me? Man, no. Tell me. Child, please, God. Man, tell me. Child, I can't while you've got your hands on me. Mumbling sound. Man, why don't you keep it in? Child, why? What are you going to do with me? Man, I want some photographs. That's all. Man, put it in. Child, don't undress me, will you? Woman, that's right, don't. Child, it hurts me. I want to see my mummy. Honest to God. Man, put it in. Child, I swear on the Bible. The haunting sound of the 10-year-old's throat being slit was also played to the court. The monster couple might have gone on to murder more had it not been for a blunder involving 17-year-old Edward. On 6th of October 1965, Brady met 17-year-old apprentice engineer Edward Evans at Manchester Central Railway Station and invited him to his home. At this point, Brady and Hindley had become intent on corrupting Myra's brother-in-law, David Smith, and recruiting him into their twisted circle, where Brady would talk about murder. Brady offered a practical demonstration with Edward, striking him 14 times with a hatchet, before finishing the job by strangling him. Horrified, Smith phoned the police the next morning and directed them to Brady's address. Officers searched 16 Wardlebrook Avenue, where they discovered Edward's corpse wrapped in plastic sheeting. The bloody murder weapon was also recovered, along with Brady's collection of books on perversion. Brady and Hindley's gruesome reign of terror began to unravel, and the twisted pair were arrested on suspicion of murder. Yes, establishment psychologists mainly churn out safe consensus platitudes and cliches. A baboon enclosure reinforcing the expedient controls of society. The psychiatrists, they accept simplistic penal criminology, adding new mental disorders daily. For judges and politicians to widen imprisonment and the inconveniently unemployed population. The other half, which is used to bomb and invade whatever underfunded country has natural resources the US, UK wish to control. I hate to say it, but there's a lot of truth in what Brady's saying here, albeit from a very negative and bitter view of the world. When he talks like this, you can maybe understand how he managed to get into Hindley's mind and convince her of his heinous beliefs. Lecturers I know confirm that students today are interested only in getting on the property ladder and have no real interest in politics. In the 60s, the names of European student leaders were known by almost everyone. In France, the student riots of the 1960s almost brought down the de Gaulle's government. I'm in the UK. The students integrated with the powers of the trade unions. Now, neither have maintained their power structures. In addition, there's no evidence of individual awareness and action filling the gap, especially as all individual action opposition against authority is labelled terrorism, antisocial, anti-authority, and thus we come full circle back to the conniving psychiatric, psychological toads of today. He obviously sounds intelligent, but also bitter, talking about the good old days. I do have to agree partly with what he's saying, but I don't like it. Getting on the property ladder is forced down our throats. Get a job, don't ask questions, conform, and like he says, if you do ask questions or fight for change, it's considered a riot. But also, I'm a believer of the psychiatric, psychological toads, as he puts it. Society is always developing, and we are understanding the human psyche more. I believe he talks so disparagingly about these people because it is those thoughts and ideas that kept him locked away for the rest of his life. And the more we learn about mental disorders, the more we realise Brady and people like him are a danger to society. One gratifying piece of university feedback from the UK and America is that students publicly state that my book on criminal psychology is worth 10 by ex-FBI profilers seeking to build a media career for themselves. One review on the Amazon website actually went overboard by classifying Janus as the most dangerous book written in the past 60 years. So honesty and objectivity is now so rare as it is in Ashworth, where it is regarded as criminal. Best wishes, Ian. Moore's murderer, Ian Brady, was England's longest serving prisoner until he died at the age of 79. He never showed any remorse for his crimes. But even as Brady, who breathed his last agonising breaths, he played one final cruel trick on his innocent victims. He had never revealed where the pair had buried their third victim, Keith Bennett, and the youngster's body has still not been found, and it is believed that Brady's final wish was for his cremated ashes to be scattered on the same moors where he killed and buried his victims. However, Brady managed to make one final bizarre request with his dying breaths. He ordered that 2 locked Samsonite briefcases should be taken from his bedside and handed to his solicitor. He had already insisted that they should not be opened until after his death. For legal reasons, these briefcases have still not been opened, but could they hold the key to bringing Keith Bennett's body home? to Brady and Hindley, good riddance. To the audience, don't forget to like and subscribe, and thank you for watching. Until next time, stay sane.